I unplugged the machine. In the sudden, deafening silence of the old arcade, with the smell of dust and ozone thick in the air, I couldn't tell if I had just saved myself or damned a soul to an eternity of digital darkness. The screen went black, but the image of that glitching, desperate face was burned onto the back of my eyelids. It's still there, even now. This is a new channel with incredible stories every day. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. My name is Alex. I'm 28, and by day I'm what you might call a professional spreadsheet filler. Data entry. It's as thrilling as it sounds. My world is a predictable landscape of cells, formulas, and the monotonous click-clack of a keyboard. But by night, or more accurately on weekends, I'm an archaeologist. Not of bones and ancient pottery, but of pixels and forgotten joy. I hunt for relics in the form of old arcade cabinets. My sanctuary, my dig site, was a place called the Pixel Palace. It wasn't a palace by any means. It was a dusty, cavernous room tucked away at the back of a dying shopping mall, a time capsule from the 1980s that the world had forgotten. The owner, a skeletal old man named Mr. Abernathy, seemed as old as the machines themselves, always sitting behind a counter with a half-empty cup of coffee and a vacant stare. The air inside always smelled the same, a unique cocktail of stale popcorn, burnt sugar from the ancient cotton candy machine, and the sharp electric scent of ozone from the CRT monitors. For me, it was the smell of home. I'd spent half my childhood there, my dad giving me a roll of quarters and letting me loose while he ran errands. It was a place of pure, unadulterated magic. Most of the machines were familiar friends: Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Galaga. I knew their patterns, their quirks, their secret levels. But one Saturday afternoon, tucked away in a dark corner I swore was empty the week before, was something new. Or rather, something old I'd never seen. It was a simple black cabinet, completely unmarked. No flashy decals, no brand names, no colorful marquee. Just a black box with a screen, a single joystick, and 2 buttons. It looked almost funereal. Above the monitor, scrawled in what looked like faded white marker, were 2 words: Echoes of Polybius. The name sent a jolt through me. Every retro gaming enthusiast knows the legend of Polybius, the mythical 1981 arcade game that supposedly appeared in a few suburbs of Portland, Oregon for about a month. The story said it was a government psychology experiment, that the game was intensely addictive and psychoactive, causing players to suffer from amnesia, insomnia, night terrors, and even suicidal tendencies. Men in black were said to have collected data from the machines. Of course, it was all just an urban legend, a ghost story for gamers. But seeing the name, right there on a real machine, it was irresistible. Mr. Abernathy was in his usual spot. I walked over, my heart thumping a little faster than usual.
Mr. Abernathy.
I started.
That new machine in the back. The black one?
He looked up, his eyes seeming to focus for the first time all day. He took a slow sip of his coffee.
Not new, Alex.
He rasped, his voice like sandpaper.
Been in storage. Decided to see if it still works.
He looked away, as if the conversation was already too much effort.
What is it?
I pressed. He just shrugged.
No idea. Found it like that. Play at your own risk.
That last part should have been a warning. But to a guy like me, it was an invitation. I slid a quarter into the slot. The machine accepted it with a dull, metallic clunk that sounded different from the cheerful jingles of the others. The screen flickered to life, not with a title screen or a Player One Start prompt, but with an immediate cascade of abstract, geometric shapes and vector lines, all pulsating in sync with a low, hypnotic, chip-tuned drone. There were no instructions, no goal. It was just happening. I gripped the joystick. The shapes on the screen responded to my movements, swirling and coalescing into new, more complex patterns. The drone in my ears evolved, adding layers of arpeggios and discordant harmonies that were somehow both unsettling and deeply compelling. I don't know how long I stood there. 5 minutes? An hour? Time seemed to dissolve. The rest of the arcade, with its familiar cacophony of explosions and jingles, faded into a distant hum. It was just me and the machine. My mind felt quiet. The usual anxieties about work, bills, and my crushingly single life were gone, replaced by a singular focus on navigating the mesmerizing, ever-shifting digital labyrinth. The game didn't feel like a competition. It felt like a collaboration. The shapes moved with me, for me. I felt a sense of mastery, of control, that I never felt in my real life. Eventually, the screen flashed with a blinding white light, and a single, low-frequency tone made my teeth vibrate. Then, it went dark. The screen read, "Continuity error." I was out of quarters, and my legs felt stiff. As I blinked, adjusting to the dim light of the arcade again, I felt a strange sense of loss. I walked out of the Pixel Palace feeling dazed but refreshed, like I'd just woken up from a deep, dreamless sleep. The feeling didn't last. Driving home, the first strange thing happened. The headlights of an oncoming car weren't just bright circles of light. For a split second, they became spinning, multicolored vector line wheels, exactly like one of the patterns from the game. I blinked hard, shaking my head. I was just tired. My eyes were playing tricks on me after staring at an old CRT screen for so long. That had to be it. But then, later that night, as I stood by my kitchen window watching it rain, I noticed the raindrops weren't falling in streaks. They were descending in a grid, like digital static, tiny pixels of water, hitting the glass with a faint, rhythmic fizzing sound that wasn't quite real. A cold dread began to creep into the edges of my mind. I told myself it was suggestion. I'd read an urban legend, and my brain was playing along. It would be gone by morning. It wasn't. The next day at work was a nightmare. The grid lines on my spreadsheet seemed to subtly waver and breathe. The monotonous clicking of my keyboard started to sound like it was syncing up with the chiptune soundtrack I could now faintly hear in the back of my head. When my boss, a cheerful woman named Carol, came over to ask a question, her face glitched. For just a heartbeat, her friendly smile pixelated. Her eyes became black squares, and her voice dropped an octave, distorting into a garbled mess of digital noise. I physically recoiled, my chair scraping against the floor. "Alex, are you okay?" she asked, her face perfectly normal again. I stammered an excuse about a headache and fled to the bathroom. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, my heart pounding in my chest. My face was pale, my eyes wide with terror. As I watched, my reflection flickered. My left eye momentarily became a mess of green and purple pixels before snapping back to normal. That's when the panic truly set in. This wasn't my imagination. Something was fundamentally wrong with my perception of reality. The game hadn't just stayed in the arcade. It had followed me home. It was infecting my world, overwriting it with its own broken code. I had a choice. I could go to a doctor, try to explain that I was seeing the world as a broken video game, and almost certainly get referred to a psychiatrist. Or I could go back to the source. Back to the machine. What would you have done in my place? Let me know in the comments. I felt this insane, illogical pull, a conviction, that the only way to fix the glitch in my reality was to go back and face the glitch in the machine. Maybe I had to beat it. Maybe I had to reach a certain level or achieve some hidden goal to win my sanity back. It was a desperate gamble, but it was the only plan I had. That evening, I drove back to the mall. The sun was setting, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to pulse with a faint inner light. The hum in my ears was louder now, a constant, low-level soundtrack to my fear. The Pixel Palace was mostly empty, just a couple of kids on the Street Fighter II machine. Mr. Abernathy was gone, his counter empty except for the cold, half-full coffee cup. The black cabinet was waiting for me in its corner, silent and imposing. It felt like it was watching me. My hands were trembling as I pulled a handful of quarters from my pocket. I fed one into the slot. The screen flickered to life, and the hypnotic drone filled the air again. But this time, it was different. The game wasn't just abstract shapes anymore. It knew me. The patterns that formed on the screen were familiar. A swirling vortex of vectors resolved itself into a pixelated, 8-bit rendering of the swing set from my childhood backyard. A cascade of green and brown squares formed the face of my old dog, Buster, who'd passed away a decade ago. His digital bark was a burst of distorted static that made my heart ache. The game was showing me my own memories, pulling them from my mind and displaying them in its broken digital language. Hope turned to ice in my stomach. This wasn't a game I could win. This was an intrusion, It was mining my soul. I played on, mesmerized and terrified, navigating through pixelated versions of my high school hallways. My first car, the face of my first girlfriend, Sarah. Each memory was tinged with the game's inherent wrongness. The low, unsettling drone twisting the nostalgia into something mournful and eerie. Then he appeared. Deep within a level that looked like a corrupted version of my own living room, I saw a figure. It was humanoid, but it was made of glitching, static, and shifting, corrupted code. It was a silhouette, a void in the game world, flickering in and out of existence. It didn't seem hostile. It seemed trapped. The figure raised a blocky, pixelated hand, not in aggression, but as if it were reaching out, trying to communicate. As I moved my joystick closer, a new sound entered the audio mix. A distorted, fragmented whisper that sounded like it was being spoken through a broken radio. The words were unintelligible, but the emotion was clear. Desperation, loneliness, fear. My own fear began to subside, replaced by a profound and chilling realization. What if the urban legend was true, but not in the way everyone thought? What if the game didn't cause players to go mad? What if it consumed them? What if this glitching figure was another player, someone who sat down at this machine years ago and never got back up? What if his consciousness was trapped inside, living out an eternity as a ghost in the machine? The glitches I was experiencing in the real world, maybe they weren't the game leaking into my reality. Maybe they were his reality leaking into mine. A cry for help from across a digital divide. I wasn't fighting a virus. I was communicating with a prisoner. The game wasn't the problem. The game was a prison, and I was looking through its only window. Have you ever experienced something so strange you started to question everything you thought you knew? I felt like I was losing my mind, but also like I was on the verge of some terrible truth. The figure reached out again, and the screen flashed. For a single, horrifying second, I saw a memory that wasn't mine. A birthday party. A cake with 10 candles. A woman with a warm smile who I'd never seen before. It was a brief, pure image, untainted by the game's glitchy aesthetic. It was his memory. A piece of the life he'd lost. And then it was gone, replaced by the glitching static of his form, the desperate, silent screaming of his existence. The goal was never to win. It was to understand. But what could I do? I kept playing, trying to get closer, trying to decipher the whispers, but I was just another visitor. Soon, my game would end, and he would be alone again in the darkness. My last quarter was in my hand. I could play one more game, one more brief visit, or I could do something else. I looked at the back of the machine. The thick, black power cord snaked from the cabinet into a grimy socket on the wall. The thought hit me like a physical blow. I could unplug it, I could cut the power, I could end it. But what would that mean? Would it free him? Or would pulling the plug on the machine be like pulling the plug on a life support system? Would it erase him completely? Annihilate the last flickering remnants of his consciousness? The alternative was to walk away. To leave him there, trapped in his endless loop, and just hope the glitches in my own vision would eventually fade. To save myself and abandon him. Before I tell you what I did, and how it haunts me to this day, if you've been on this journey with me, please consider subscribing. It helps more than you know, and it ensures you won't miss whatever comes next. Standing there in the humming silence of the arcade, I was faced with an impossible choice. Condemn him to an eternity in that digital cage, or risk destroying him completely in a desperate attempt at mercy. The glitching figure on the screen seemed to be pleading with me, its form flickering more violently now, as if it knew what I was thinking. The whispers grew more frantic. I saw another flash of his life, a bike ride on a sunny day, a feeling of warm grass. These weren't just images, they were feelings. The game was transmitting his memories, his very being, directly into my head. He wasn't just a player. He was the game now. Echoes of Polybius. He was the echo. I couldn't just walk away. I couldn't leave him there. I walked to the back of the cabinet, my hand shaking uncontrollably. I gripped the thick, dusty plug. I looked back at the screen one last time. The figure was still, its hand outstretched. For a moment, just a moment, I think it smiled. I pulled the plug. The screen went black instantly. The hypnotic drone cut out. plunging the corner of the arcade into a profound and heavy silence. The silence was so complete, so sudden, it was more shocking than the noise had been. For a few seconds, I just stood there, my hands still on the plug, my heart hammering against my ribs. The faint grid lines that had been overlaid on my vision were gone. The humming in my ears was gone. I looked at my hands. They were just hands, solid, real. The world had snapped back into its proper resolution. The glitches had stopped. I felt an overwhelming wave of relief wash over me, so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. I was free. I was sane. But as the relief subsided, it was replaced by a cold, hollowing dread. The silence from the corner where the machine stood was no longer peaceful. It was empty. It was the silence of a tomb. Did I free him, or did I kill him? Did his consciousness dissipate into nothingness? Or did I release him into whatever comes next? I will never know. I walked out of the Pixel Palace and didn't look back. I've never returned. My life is back to normal. Spreadsheets, coffee, quiet nights. The world looks as it should, but something is different. I feel watched. Sometimes, in the reflection of my computer monitor when it's turned off, I think I see a flicker of static. In moments of perfect silence, I can almost hear a faint, distant whisper on the edge of my hearing. I save myself, I'm sure of that. But I carry the weight of that choice with me every single day. I unplugged the machine, and in doing so, I created a ghost that will haunt me forever. So that's my story. Was I hallucinating? Was there really someone trapped in that machine? Or was it something else entirely? Share your thoughts or theories in the comments. I read all of them.